Hello, good morning. We are attending today to the seminar by Aitazaz Farooque. Aitazaz he's a professor at the University of Prince Edward Island. He told me right now he's an associate professor, but he's going to be a full professor shortly. So he has a lot of experience on research related to precision agriculture. Developing smart agriculture technologies adapted to climate change agriculture. He's very interested there in the application of new precision agriculture technologies to climate change strategies. Today, he's going to present some of his research conducted in Canada. I was talking to him, and he's also involved in exchange programs for students, for faculty. So if anyone is interested in any collaboration or connection with him, he's very welcome to email to him and establish contact. He's going to be with us today and tomorrow. We'll be going for lunch with him for anyone who wants to join us. He's going to be around tomorrow and meet some other professors. So if anyone wants to discuss with him, you can send him an email. With that, I'm going to pass the floor to Aitazaz, and I hope you enjoy the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Miguel, for the introduction, and thank you for arranging this seminar for me. It's been a pleasure to be here. And thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you all. And so as Professor Miguel mentioned, so I'm Aitazaz Farooque, and my background is agricultural engineering. And I've been working on precision agriculture technologies for the past 12 years. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about precision agriculture technologies, how they relate with the efficient agriculture or climate smart agriculture, and how we can improve the profitability at the same time mitigate the environmental risks. Okay. So why agriculture? So there are few reasons for that. Number one, so it is a source of livelihood for a lot of people. So it ensures food security. It is a national income for many, many countries, especially agriculture-based economies. So it provide their living. At the same time, a lot of people work in agriculture industry. When I say agriculture, so that is production and processing. So that also employs a lot of people, and that generates a lot of revenue and income for them. Another reason why we are investigating this is that agriculture consumes a significant amount of water. So we need to be efficient on water management. So how we can do that? Then also 34% of the land area that is covered by agriculture, then greenhouse gas emissions are associated with that. And then also it provides the employment opportunities. Now the challenge we have is the population. So population is increasing exponentially, and it's going to hit a huge and significant number by 2050. And our land is shrinking. So that because of urbanization, more houses are coming, agriculture land is being converted into urbanization. So that means we need to still produce more food, but with the less land and accessibility. So we need to be smart, we need to produce efficient, and that's where we're heading. This is one picture I took in Mexico City. So just to kind of see how the population trend. So now just coming back to the challenges. So the growing population is a challenge. Then by 2050, we're going to touch about 10 billion people. Then we need 50% more food and fiber. So then we also need additional land to produce that feed. And then the land accessibility is an issue. So those are the challenges in front of all of us, including many more. And then also the greenhouse gas emissions with the climate change, that also causing a big issue. So now my strategy to this challenge is the precision agriculture. So if we can grow effectively, we can manage our inputs, we can manage the crop and soil variability as we go, and then and we provide what the plant needs, not uniformly. So by taking into account the spatial and temporal variability, we can increase profitability. At the same time, we can ensure sustainability. So here is another definition from US House of Representatives. So precision agriculture is a system of approaches. So that is a whole farm approach to increase production efficiency, productivity, profitability, at the same time mitigating or lowering the unintended effects to the environment. When I say environment, so that is greenhouse gas emissions, that is leaching of nutrients, runoff of nutrients in the water bodies, and provide unfavorable conditions. So those are the unintended impacts. So now this is the program I have in Canada. So you can see there is mapping technology, a component of it. We have a lot of drone technology we use for mapping. We have soil-based sensors we use for mapping. And then obviously those are new references. Then we look into variability technology. And also we have fertigation systems at a small scale, then harvesting system and data management for the harvester to come up with some recommendations out of that data. And then obviously the data management and information system. So then once that data is collected from various sources or various pillars, then we evaluate the socioeconomic benefits. We look into environmental impacts by installing the lysimeters and runoff collectors and whatnot. And then obviously we share that information with the producers and end users through the farmer field days. We have annual field days. We have quarterly meetings with the growers. And that's where we present our results. At the end of the day, so if these results are not helping the end user or the grower, then whatever you're doing, to me, that's not playing the role. And also we are at the proof of concept technology. Then for a couple of things, we are at a pre-commercialization stage and trying to attain the licenses from the various stakeholders. So this is the current team I have in my research group. So I have undergraduate student, I have graduate students, and also the postdocs. So they are working for me on various projects and trying to help and work on various projects to develop the precision agriculture technologies. So these are various sensors, not limited, but there are many mentors. So for example, GIS is very common, plant height sensor are common, NDVI meters are common. And these days, multispectral cameras are used on the drone to do the NDVI mapping. Thermal cameras are used for the temperature mapping. We have developed this slope sensing system at our own. So this is custom developed because in PEI, Atlantic Canada, where I'm from, we are not flat. So we have hills and agriculture happens on the hills. So that's why we need that topographic system so that we can look into the. So then we have remote sensing, color cameras, electromagnetic induction sensors. So then we have drone technology, we have moisture sensors, and many other sensors which can be used for precision agriculture. And the whole idea behind those sensors is to capture the variability, respond to that variability, manage that variability as we go, and make an impact. So I'll start off with the soil, and I will be presenting few different things here, and I'll try to connect them together. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about soil sensing and how we do the soil sensing, what we got out of it, and then how we develop the sprayer, then what are the unintended, how we quantify the environmental impact, how we look at the productivity, how we did the irrigation. So I'll try to connect the story there. So these are the 4 sites you can see. So those sites were selected, obviously, boundaries were mapped, sampling points in different zones were collected, and just to see zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, how they are different, what is the productivity, what is the soil strength and whatnot. So once that was done, so we use dual EM sensor. I'm going to bring the one slide up. So this is the dual EM sensor. So we can drag that behind the ATV and we come up with a management zone. And this is EMI-based sensor, so it has two transmitter and one receiver. So they basically produce the magnetic field in the soil, and based on the strength of the magnetic field, you can identify what is the productivity or the soil health of that status. So once that's done, so then we bring that data in GIS. You can see various maps here. So those represent the variability. So they are not the same. So you can see light color, the dark color and whatnot. For example, look at the two maps on the left. So the conductivity map and then organic matter map. So the blue areas are lower in organic matter. If you look at the organic matter, so those are also lower. So that was very good match there if we compare. And then the same way, there were not other things, they were not matching very well. That's okay. So not necessarily all the factors are playing their role. So we need to identify what are the significant factors, and if we can manage those factors, so that's the way to go. So here are some other maps from the. So once that all data is collected, obviously there is a statistical analysis involved, there is a geostatistical analysis involved, there is a GIS analysis involved, and then you develop clusters. And then in this particular case, we developed 5 clusters using cluster analysis to see. So what it does, it groups the areas which have the same productivity. For example, in this part, so that's area 1, 2, 3, 4, it's going to see in each area where is 1. So which one, and then it's going to group it up. Okay, so that's what the clustering does. So once the clustering is done, so then again, the mapping was done. So in this particular case, we found that the conductivity sensors combined with the topography, that was able to explain about 65 to 70% of the variability. So the parameters were basically significantly affected. So now in this case, if I tell a grower that you have 20 different parameters to manage, they cannot. They don't have a capacity or capability to do that. But if I tell them, well, if you can map your field with the conductivity sensors coupled with the topography, you have a pretty good promising looking map with the 70% accuracy, because you're never going to get 100 because there are other factors which are playing the role. And the Mother Nature is playing the role, right? So that's why, so if based on this, so we recommended to the growers that let's use this technology combined with the topography and then apply our fertilization based on that, because that was the way to go. So now these are the, once that was done, so this year we did these 2 fields, and then 5 zones were a little too much for the growers to manage. So they thought 3 would be enough so that they can have a bed. So because we want to make it as practical as possible so that we can apply. So in these 2 sites, you can see the red areas, green areas, and yellow areas. So those are the 3 zones which are developed by combining the topography data and the conductivity data. Okay. So once that was done, so the idea was to apply the fertilizer using Olympian strategy, that feed your best athletes. That because in PEI, as I said earlier, so we are not flat. We have a lot of erosion issue. So once after the snow melts, the top surface is gone in many areas. So now if there is no topsoil, that means we are dealing with a gravel, right? And there is less organic matter, less nutrient retention. So even if we are putting fertilizer there, seeding there, everything there, but there is a good chance we're not going to make anything out of it, because we know that there is no mechanism or productivity at the support there. So in this one, so we had 3 zones. So the white areas, then yellowish areas, and red areas. So the white areas were low productivity zone based on the conductivity and topography. And then the yellow areas or orange areas, whatever you want to call, so those were kind of medium productivity and high productivity. So we varied the rate by 15%. And that was by guess, that we want to try it out and see how that goes. There is no scientific mechanism for me to see why 15%. So we just try 15%, and that may not be right. So that was our just try. Okay. So now in this one, so you can see, and then also we want to compare that with the traditional practice where we apply uniform, we don't care. because we have a good comparison within the same field. So these are our check areas, which are dotted areas. So we applied uniform rate all over the place as the grower does. And then this area and that area, so we applied variable using the prescription map and allocated rates. So when we did that, we also did a GIS analysis. We found that the check areas or uniform areas were 6 acres. Then the variable rate areas were 10 acres. On an average, we end up spending or putting 211 pounds per acre in the check areas, 215 pounds per acre. And so non-significantly different. Basically, based on the area coverage, we end up putting the same. But in this, we put more in the highly productive areas to generate more. So these are as per applied map. So then this fertilization was done using a variable rate fertilizer spreader. So this spreader is capable of reading those prescription maps and apply input space. Obviously, this spreader was calibrated and validated before we go in to see it is actually applying the same. Okay. So then this is the yield map. So you can see the yield with the red areas are low yielding areas. And then the green areas are high yielding areas from the same field. And you can see a huge variation and variability within the field, right? So it's not consistent. So now when we overlay those with the prescription map, and so we found that the check areas all together, so they generated about 32,000 pounds per acre. So overall, the variable rate was able to produce 310 pounds per acre more compared to check areas, which was quite good. So because this was the first try. So now when we did the economic analysis of it, we were able to see that there were $36 per acre more, which we were able to generate. Remember, this was just for potash application. We did not try nitrogen. We did not try irrigation or any other inputs based on that because we were in the trial state. So we really don't want to open up too many factors and then hard to justify what was playing role, what wasn't playing role. So this was just for potash. And then we take into account how much it would cost to map topography and EC for the field. Okay, so we estimated to be $15 per acre. So even then, our return on investment was $21 per acre, so which was quite significant. So now, based on this, so we saw that we can do variable rate lime application based on that map. So that might increase the productivity and profitability, nitrogen, irrigation, planting, and there could be many, many other applications using the same map. So which can enhance the profitability and productivity. So now also in different zones, because we calibrated the yield monitor obviously before we plot that in GIS. So then also in different zones, we wanted to pick some potatoes manually to verify what's going on so that our numbers make sense. It could be like a faulty, what you call the yield monitoring system. So we really want to cross-check and validate. So we had the 10-feet strip in different zones, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. We manually dig them. It was laborious, but it was a good thing to do to kind of certify and assess the accuracy of our system. And we did find significant differences there. So here in the low productivity zone, so we were less than 30,000. Then there was a non-significant difference between medium and high, although the high productivity was able to generate more compared based on those digs. And we did not dig many numbers, so we had 6 in each zone. So that because it was manual and it was a lot of labor. Okay. So now switching the gears and trying to bring, so now once everything is planted and seeding is done, obviously the next step for us was monitoring how the crop is doing. Okay, and when I say monitoring, that is NDVI mapping, that is RGB mapping, that is also the thermal mapping in a good dry sunny day on an island where we have erosion issue. The one part of the field could be heating up quicker compared to other because there is no support mechanism there because the topsoil is eroded. Okay? So then we get into the drone imagery. So obviously flight planning, then images captured, then images are processed, and then map is generated for different things, whatever you're looking for, whether that is the NDVI or RGB or multispectral or whatever. So then these are some mechanism, planning, geotagging, stitching, and then processing, bead pressure, and then prescription map. So now here, so that's look like a final product for one of the field we had the last year. So this year we are in the season, but we are 3 months away, or 4 months away from completion. So I don't have results for this year. So these are from last year. So this is the yield map. So you can see this is NDVI map, and this is the soil water topography map, which I was referring to as a SWOT map. So that take into account the electrical conductivity and topography. Okay. So now if you look at the yield map here on the right hand side, so if you look here, yield is less, so plants are not doing well either. Okay. So again, move on. So around here, the yield was less. So we found that the plant's NDVI wasn't great. So there was a very good match with NDVI and yield. So that kind of gave us an idea. Maybe with the prescription map, adding the NDVI on top, maybe those are the two things to integrate to see if we can do even better. Okay. So then also it has a very good comparison with the SWOT map too. So in this area, you can see less yield. So those are not very good areas either. So the soil health is not good. So here you can see much more higher yield. So high patches here, but also some low yield there. And again, the SWOT map was only able to explain I would say, 65 to 70% matching. But NDVI with the yield match really. Okay. So that was the thing. So now this was another field. So for NDVI and same strategy. So we had a good comparison, but in this field, it didn't match quite well as the previous field. Okay. I don't know the reason. So we are looking into it and exploring that. So now the next step was to look at how the thermal imagery can help us to develop the pest management. Okay. As I said, so this is the image taken before planting. After the snow melt, you can clearly see these are the water pathways. Those are the erosion pathways from the top, right? So now when the planting was done, everything disappeared because we have nice furrows on top and it was all good, right? So we could not see. But then in July, on a hot day, when we did the thermal imagery, the same areas where it was erosion, so those were heating up quicker. Okay? And they were roughly 15 degrees higher compared to the other areas, 10 to 15, depending on the height, the day of that. So now when we had the yield monitor data, so we brought that into it, and those same areas were producing less. Okay. So that kind of gave us an evidence that erosion is an issue. So we cannot have the same nutrient management scheme or same even seeding scheme of things to actually cover that. Because what happens here, so these areas are going to produce less, maybe less than the break-even, that where the farmer know at the start that he or she is going to lose because the soil is not productive enough. The other areas, so these blue areas per se, they're going to generate more. And these blue areas, what they're going to end up doing is covering the cost of those red areas, right? And that kind of lead us to the idea of profitability map. Like which are the areas where I'm making profit, which are the areas where I'm losing, and then where I break even. Now the question is, if I know at the start I'm going to lose in those areas, is it worth to actually put potatoes in? Or maybe put some cover crop or build the organic matter and leave the area for a while, for a few years, and then kind of come back to it. So that might be it. And then have more revenue from the areas where you think they're productive. Okay. Anyway, so the next one, because so this was to look at the impact of the climate change, and I will come back to the thermal imagery and SWOT map, and will present you some slides on the variable rate seeding. Okay. So before we get into that, so this was an idea that on PEI, Prince Edward Island, we are rain-fed. We don't have irrigation. I shouldn't say we don't have irrigation. Maybe 5% of the fields are irrigated, or even 2%. Rest is rain-fed. We have been very lucky that we got the rain and it was on time and we never had. But with the climate change now, the patterns have shifted. So July and August are very crucial for us. If we don't get water in July and August for 14 to 18 consecutive days, we are in drought. And that causes a big problem and kind of put us on the sustainability list. So this study was to evaluate what we can do about it. So how much water is important if the climate change trend stays, so where we are. Okay. So now we look at the climate index. So those indices are set by the environmental agencies. They are well adopted, well respected. And out of these, we want to find out how much of the role that water is playing, or what are the climatic variables or factors which are having an impact on the yield. So based on this, so we found that, so these were the factors like cold nights are fluctuating. So we are having less cold nights, and then also warm evenings, warm nights, cold days, continuous dry days, continuous wet days. So those are deviating. So those were having some significant effect on the yield. So now when we look at the all together, so now the continuous dry days, obviously, if you're, as I said, so 2 to 3 weeks, you don't get a rain, you're in drought, especially when the temperature is high. Okay. So now the maximum temperature was causing a problem. So the daytime temperature and minimum temperature. So those were the factors which were causing an issue. And if we look at them closely, so about 30% or 39% of the variability in the yield was caused by those 4 factors. So that means we need to manage the hot days, and maybe we need to supplement that with the water so that we don't get into drought. Okay, so that the plants are not under stress or under water stress. So that was a bit of a study. So one of my MSc students this study who graduated and currently working for me as a research associate. So now coming back to the SWOT mapping. So we had so this was about the variable rate seeding trial. So where we use the SWOT map to see if we can vary the seeding, not only the nutrient, but the seed rates, because we know if the soil is not that productive, why we want to put the standard practice there, 15 inches or 17 inches or whatever, right? So the idea in this was, so we had the strips across the field, we SWOT map it. When I say SWOT map it, we have the electrical conductivity and topography combined and generate the map out of it. And then we try to include the zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3, kind of randomize those treatments, and then vary the seed. So now in this one, the standard growing practice is 17 inches. So 17 inches from one seed to the other. Okay. So now the idea was where we feel like the soil is productive, we will reduce it to 15.3. And then where we felt like the soil is eroded and soil health is not good, we will separate them by 18. Okay, 18.7. And again, those are hit and trial numbers. I don't have any scientific reason why 17 and 18.7. So basically, we kind of fluctuate by 10%. Okay. So now this is again with a drone in different zone. You can see the different plants and average spacing, how it varied. And then also we were able to do some analysis. What is the canopy coverage in that? And so kind of have a good estimation what's going on in each zone when we vary the seed. Okay. So now this is the emergence map for the same field. So those yellow lines are our trial lines, and you can see the emergence is different, canopy area is different in different zone based on the coverage we have. And obviously this is the SWOT map. Okay. So on the left-hand side, so you can see the red areas, then yellow, kind of green mix, and then all green. Okay. So then if I bring it up, so those are, again, when I saw that, so when I use the standard spacing in the low zone area, with the standard spacing, I was able to generate about 450 hundredweight per acre. And then average spacing all over the place, without considering the variability, so that produced significantly lower. And then where I increased the spacing a little bit in the low area, so I was able to generate more. Because there was a less of a competition for the plants, for the nutrient uptake, for the water uptake, and bit of less of a competition. So again, we are repeating this trial in 4 fields this year. So last year we only tried 1 just to kind of test it, and this was a preliminary test. We saw some good results, and this year we are repeating on the 4 commercial fields where we will be evaluating it in more detail and productivity and whatnot. So another project, again, when we have the potatoes up and running, so we have weed issue, disease issue, right? So now how we smartly manage the weed and disease. So for potatoes, so we developed our own custom beard sprayer, okay? So this was from scratch. We could not use the all-terrain vehicle, which is Smart ATV, because, or you can say the golf court, because the clearance, because it is low clearance and it will hit the farm. So it has to be high clearance in some autonomous system, which is a prototype. So we use artificial intelligence and deep learning models to develop that. Okay? And we have used TensorFlow and various other programs and frameworks to test and validate the images and whatnot. So to do that, we collected about 15,000 images and videos. So those were still images, moving images, and blurred images, all kind of variation under different conditions. When potato plants were healthy, when they were diseased, when they were diseased and healthy combined, when they combined with the bare soil, when they combined with the weed, all kind of combination you can think of. So we had all covered. And then also, since the climate is another factor, we took the images in the morning, we took around 10 a.m., we 12, then because the light changes, okay? If our model is not built to take into account those variations, the accuracy is going to go down. And then also we take care of when it's partially cloudy, when it's fully cloudy, when it's sunny, when it's partially sunny, so that again, all the climatic conditions are embedded in that script. Okay. So then once those images were collected, so we developed our own software. We were able to label them, what is what. Okay. Then whether it is a disease, weed, or bare soil, or whatever. So we had a set of images labeled. Okay, because if we manually do that, that's going to take thousands of hours to actually label them. So we have an automated software which we built in the programming language, and then we were able to do that very, very quick. Okay. So you can see those rectangles. So then this was a little bit of a test. So I'll just run it here. So we had the potato plants and we had the weed plants. So as soon as it goes over, it basically creates a rectangle. So it picks up the weed. So this was in the parking lot. We kind of tested initially to see whether we are accurate based on the small model we built on that. Okay. So you can see on the left-hand side, there is a plant that kind of skips it, and the other one, it kind of creates a rectangle. So that's basically target versus non-target, what we are looking for. Okay. So then after that, so those models were deployed, and then a custom software was built to actually connect the cameras with the control system through the Raspberry Pi, and a control system and the flow meters were installed, and solenoid valves were integrated to actually do the variable rate those agrochemical application. So these are the solenoid valves, flow meters, webcam, then nozzles, then we have a control box here, and then there is LCD right on the screen. We can see what is coming, and then it makes the decision as we go. And to process this image, it takes 37 milliseconds. It is quick. Like the cameras are 6 inches ahead of the boom. It takes the image, it gets processed quick, and then signal sent to the control that here we are. Okay. So then this is more like a CAD diagram for the buggy we built, and everything in this was custom built. So we had done that in our machine shop, and I have few papers published on this in Computers and Electronics in Agriculture Journal, in Precision Agriculture Journal, and in Remote Sensing Journal. So we had few papers published on this development. So this is more like, I would say again, the parking lot testing when we thought it's all fully developed. So I'll just, where did it go? Okay. No. So you will see that as soon as it hits the lamb's water, so this is in the middle is a potato plant, it won't spray. Any weed it will pick up, it will spray. Okay? So then, and we kind of randomized it so that it's unbiased. We kind of mix it up with the plant and weed and all that. And the speed was around 6 kilometers per hour, which is pretty traditional. Okay, so this was another, I had a one-day Precision conference, so there was about 100 people I invited for the demonstration of the technology, all the growers mainly, and again, all right, so then we get into the field. So we did some approximation based on the weed and disease coverage. So in all cases, we were able to save more than 40% of that, which was huge. That because weeds are distributed, disease is distributed, is never uniform. But if we have a technology that can account for that and apply agrochemical site specifically or based on need, so that's gonna help. Okay, so that kind of helps the grower to save agrochemicals and improve on the production cost and produce more with the less cost. So whatever you want. So then this was more like for weed application right in the field. So that it picks up the weeds with So you can see the clearance of the honey, so it's high so that it doesn't hit the furrow. But if we use all-terrain vehicle, that's going to hit the furrow. And we had bottom-sensitive papers which we installed at targeted areas to see if they got fixed. For example, here was one bottom-sensitive paper. So this was on the plant. It didn't get fixed. Did not get it. It still has a little bit of a drift because we had the wind, but it did not spray anything. Okay, so that means it avoided the potato plant, but it also targeted the beans. Okay. So next, because we were using artificial intelligence and deep learning, so we thought let's look into the groundwater fluctuations using EI, and because we are looking into irrigation and supplement irrigation, if we can relate that with the groundwater and see. So in this one, we had two watersheds, Baltic and New Dominion. So those are in PEI. We have several variables which we want to model using those EI and deep learning models. And then the idea was to see if we can predict them. So now this is the New Dominion and Baltic watershed. So you can see for different years, and the actual is the dotted line, then multi-layer perceptron, that is the neural network model, and then long and short-term memory network and convolutional neural network. So we applied 4 different models to see, and you can see in all cases, the fluctuations in the groundwater at the measured location for the Baltic and New Dominion were matching up pretty good, right? So that kind of gives us an idea that we can use the AI and deep learning to actually model the watersheds and actually look at the fluctuations in the groundwater. So this was the training period. This was the validation period. And then when we look at that, so we had 3 input variables, we had 4 input variables, and then the idea was to model it with the less of the input variable, because more the data we add, we can make it accurate, but not as applicable for the end use. because we want to make it applicable for the end user, so we need less input. So that if I say, well, if you have a surface water, can you relate that with the elevation or whatnot to kind of predict how it's going to behave? That's easy enough. But if I say, well, you need all 12 weather variables, then 10 different soil variables, and then the grower is not interested to listen to me because it's too complicated. So now, once that was done, so we had the field selected. So this is about the evapotranspiration and crop water requirements. So again, we used artificial intelligence and deep learning to look at the evapotranspiration. So in this long and short-term memory networks, LSTM, and then bidirectional LSTMs, we employed those. In both cases, our accuracy was about 92%. So which kind of gave us an idea that we can actually determine the crop water requirement at different stages using AI. So we are one of the few first ones who applied this deep learning in AI for evapotranspiration and groundwater modeling. So there are traditional software which people use, SWOT and ModFlow, but this application is pretty neat. We did not develop it. Somebody else developed the models, but we use those for our purposes, and they work fine. So once that crop water requirement was determined, so we installed an irrigation system. And as I said earlier, that in Prince Edward Island, we are rain-fed. We don't have the irrigation per se. Very few fields have the irrigation or overhead sprinklers and pivot irrigation, but majority is rain-fed. So in this, the idea was, yes, we will apply based on the crop water need. We will apply only what is required, and then we compare that where it was rain-fed, no water at all, kind of see, and we have randomized complete block design. We replicate the different treatments and whatnot, and then the idea was again to establish if the irrigation was helping and whether that was sustainable or not. So in this case, we had this study for 2 years. So you can see in 2018, sprinkler irrigation was found to be the best one. And then drip and fertigation, they were not much different than the control, but we found very late the emitters were not at the target area. So emitter was a little bit off. And what we did, we installed the emitters in our lab and kind of went and spread the drip line. But then in 2019, we learned the lesson. We thought, no, we're not going to do that. We will put the emitters when the plant emerges so that we know the emitter is right on the target. So in 2019, we installed the emitters, and you can see, irrespective of the irrigation method, we were able to increase the yield significantly. So that means continuous dry period is going to have a drought, and that's going to impact the productivity. And on the control, that is no irrigation at all. So that is. So then also we look at the environmental impact of the traditional agriculture system, compare it with the more sustainable system. For example, we have these lysimeters installed so we can have a groundwater or subsurface water quality, look at it. Then these are the flumes to collect the runoff. As I said, so we are not flat. We have the topography. We just need to find out based on the catchment where our runoff's going to look like and put the flume. And then we capture that water, analyze that for phosphorus loading, nutrient concentrations, and whatnot. And these are the gas chambers. So we can bring the Lycor meter. I have 3 or 4 in my lab, which I bought through a big grant. And they can do the in situ measurements for the carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, and whatnot. And then because it is dependent on the temperature and moisture, so we try to do that like early in the morning, then when it's really high, when it drops down, when it's wet, when it's dry, so that we can have a good approximation and quantification how much emissions are happening. So now in this particular study, we try to embed biochar. So biochar is becoming popular these days to retain the water and nutrient and whatnot. And also we added compost and then the combination of the biochar and fertilizer to make up the supplement nutrients what are missing in the biochar. Then we had obviously the control, which is inorganic fertilizer. And the idea was again to look at the productivity with the lens of environment, that whether those treatments were helpful for the environment. Okay. So now here is a little bit of a graph. So that's about the organic matter fluctuation in different treatments. So this is at the start, and we are monitoring this study because organic matter doesn't change it over a year. It takes 5 to 10 years. So we're monitoring that. So this is the CO2 emissions. So we found that there were quite a bit of emissions in the control, then synthetic fertilizer, then biochar reduced a little bit, and compost was found to have the lowest emission. So take home, based on all that, I don't know how much time. Yeah, so based on all that, so what we found, or what is the take home message, is that we need to develop the map and sensor based system which are smart, which can basically characterize and quantify the variability, gives us the tool to manage that variability as we go, whether that is post-processing or real time. The idea is to develop those systems so that we can be efficient, we can be climate smart, we can be precise. And then apply the nutrients based on the need to evaluate the productivity benefits that once we apply, then obviously it has to make economic sense for the growers. If you have a very good technology, but it doesn't pay the growers' bills, they're not interested. Because at the end of the day, they have to pay those bills. They have to make profit because they are investing time and energy into it. Then apply the waste products and biocircular economy concept to see if we can reduce the emissions. Then evaluate the environmental impacts of the, when I say environmental impact, that is leaching, nutrient runoff, greenhouse gas emission, monitor about air quality and whatnot, just to see on top of the productivity and profitability, what kind of a role these technologies are playing to improve the environment. And then whatever we develop as scientists, as young researchers and students, at the end of the day, it has to be user-friendly. That the end user can appreciate that they are able to use it. If we have a very good technology, but it is crazy complex, then they're not interested because they don't have the capacity to adopt to that. So it has to be user-friendly. And then obviously we need to train the highly qualified personnel, which are grad student, undergrad student, postdoc, and the researchers, so that they can basically be future leaders in these technologies and cope with the innovations and technological changes we are going through. At the end, I would like to acknowledge my government and industrial partners who I work with for a long, long time to do these projects, and I appreciate their financial support and technical support for that. So those are represented on this slide, which are federal government, provincial government, and industrial organizations for their help and support. At the end, thank you all for listening, and thank you, Miguel, for the invitation and hosting me here. It's been a pleasure to be here, and I can take any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Farooque. Now we're going to start with the questions. I propose that first we ask if there is anyone in the room who has a question, and then we'll open the questions to anyone attending the seminar online. Okay? Is there any question from people in the room?
I do have a question.
Please go ahead.
Yes. If I understood correctly the sequence, the idea was to go to the field and pick up as much information as possible on any possible factor affecting productivity.
Yeah.
Okay. And then at some point you have to
narrow it down.
To narrow down the number of factors and decide what are the most the factors more closely associated with yield at the very end. At some point, we said that 39% of yield was explained by 4 factors. So it looks like there is a lot of noise probably coming out of all the factors.
Yeah.
So how do you manage to narrow down the number of factors and really decide the general picture shows that these 4 factors, or in this area, these other factors, these 3 or 4 or 5 or 10, and in different areas, different factors, something like that. And if so, are there any kind of weighting to different factors, because this is more important than this is less?
For sure. So what we did for example, on the soil-based sensor, so we had 23 different variables, which were obviously all kind of nutrients, organic matter, soil moisture, sensors data, and all that. So we did the multiple regression to see what is the joint effect of the soil variables. And obviously, soil is not only thing which is contributing to the yield. Obviously, environment is contributing. Obviously, the management practice is contributing. And if you're dealing with the fruit crops, pollination is contributing. And there could be many, many other uncontrollable factors. Water is playing the role. So based on that soil, we did the multiple regression. We found that the soil variables were able to explain about, say, 70% of the variability. The rest is uncontrollable. The rest are others. Now, then the next step was to do stepwise regression to see what are, out of those 23, what are the significant factors. And then when we say significant, for example, the moisture content came to be one of the significant factors. Organic matter came to be one of the significant. Phosphorus and nitrogen, one of those. So I call those nutrients. I don't call per se phosphorus and nitrogen. If they're both significant, I'll take one, because based on the individual correlation. So then you kind of find out there are 3 or 4 out of those which are explaining 65% rather than 72. So then you kind of trade off. Okay, I'm eliminating 20 different variables at the sake of 6%. Is that a good deal? So this is how we use to kind of narrow it down. And then, as you said, so there could be other factors where we can apply weightage. So like those could be GIS-based clusters. Like this cluster has a weight of 1, 5, and then there are other techniques people use, fuzzy cluster, to kind of give the weightage to different factors. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any other questions, please?
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for your very nice presentation. And I would like to ask you about, I have 2 questions, 2 basic questions. The first one is about topography. You don't introduce it as a factor, no, into multiple regression.
We have the slope in we had the slope in the equation.
And then, so how do you measure the topography? Which kind of technology?
We have developed, so we use accelerometers. We have developed a system, those accelerometers, which are basically tilt sensor. So you can look at the tilt, and you can mount them on ATV and it is hooked up and integrated with a GPS that you kind of map. It takes point per program, and then you can, and those accelerometers we calibrated with the known slope points. Yeah. Like we have pegged them. We had that handheld, what the construction people use, put it there, what is the slope. And then when we pass over that area on the same geographic position, so we had a calibration developed how accurate that was. So this is how we developed and then another way we did is elevation, so which we got from LiDAR, and in GIS we converted the elevation and processed that into slope. So that was another way to do that too. So now these days we are relying more on the LiDAR data because we had that. And then we are processing that in GIS using the slope conversion tool in the spatial analyst to convert that into slope.
And the LiDAR is on the drone, no, I think.
Yeah, we have it on the drone. We have it on the ATV too.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be very, very expensive.
Yeah, we were lucky to have a big project with the federal government for infrastructure and equipment. So a huge funding. So that's where we bought all the equipment.
And then the second question is about the soil moisture. We use TDL maybe for measuring soil moisture, no? Or
It depends on the experiment. For example, we have a network of soil sensors, which we have established at the site, and we can monitor on our phone, like for the trial study. And then also we have used TDR at various locations, obviously a calibrated TDR. And then we also have those, I call them a shorter version of TDR. They're not as big, but you can kind of stick them in, and then you can hook up with the wire and kind of leave them and monitor them for 24 hours. And you can collect that data with a Bluetooth.
do you think that this low-cost TDR or this Raspberry, I think technology could be suitable for this purpose? Or
well, I don't know, to be honest. We haven't explored much into water or irrigation where I am. So I can say that we are exploring what would be the best option for us. So, and we started collecting some data. We started visualizing and realizing that there are trends we need to account for. We need to be careful so that we are proactive and kind of managing so that it's not causing us any profitability issue or sustainability issue. Thank you very much.
Is there any question from the people attending online? Please raise your hand and we'll pass you the floor. Can we see all the participants here?
No.
Just in case we are missing someone. There is no questions from the audience online. I do have a question.
Sure.
I was wondering about the SWOT map. Okay, that is mainly based on the electrical conductivity, measured on ground, and the topographic slope.
Yeah.
Okay. This is fine at the experimental side, but I was wondering if you check if we can approach or get an approximate map by using other variables that are easier to obtain for the commercial farms. For instance, NDVI maps from previous years. You have a series of 5 or 6 years from the same field. You can come out with a sort of a productivity map that could be used. I was wondering either NDVI when the crop is already covered ground, or sometimes we also try with maps from right after seeding. What you really have is the soil color, darker areas or lighter areas, and then you can also obtain sort of a map from some satellite measurements. So my question is, if you have any experience checking how it's a double question, how close that could be to a productivity map, and also if you use it year after year, are these productivity areas or polygons in your field, do they stay over time or do they tend to change?
Well, mostly soil properties don't tend to change that quick. So it takes a while. So for example, with the SWOT map, so for us, in PEI, we deal with big fields, like 40 hectare, 100 hectare, like a big field. So behind an ATV, it takes us an hour to map a field, and then we have a map. So it doesn't take a whole lot of time. Now, coming back to your NDVI question, remote sensing, obviously those are techniques and they can be used, yes. So now with the potato production, we are on a 3-year rotation. So you can have potatoes every 3 years. So that is the government legislature. that you cannot have potatoes every year. So 1 year potatoes, then 2 years you have to have cover crops. And those cover crops are either alfalfa or ryegrass or wheat or barley or corn or whatever that might look like. And now when you have 2 years of continuous cover crops, so those 2 years, basically you're adding residue to the soil. And that provincial legislation or provincial clause is to contribute to the soil so that the soil is not exhausted. So it is having some organic matter back or some residue back. And obviously organic matter conversion is not an easy process. So in that way, when you have potatoes this year and you know the next 2 years, you're not going to have potatoes and it will be different. So then maybe the NDVI map might not be a good tool because it's been 3 years since that map was done. And then you have 2 other cover crops. But if you have, say, wheat or rye or anything, which like year after year, you're getting the same crop, yes, the trends will be consistent. And I have a PhD student. We are looking at 3 different remote sensing techniques, Landsat, Sentinel, and I was able to buy a paid imagery that is Planet. And Planet is very accurate. They say 50 centimeter accurate, which is way higher than the free imagery. So the idea is we are looking at the soil colors, and that PhD student is evaluating the spectral reflectance and the soil color to see if we can use that as a management strategy. So we are exploring and looking into that. To answer your question, yes, NDVI map and remote sensing maps are useful. They can be used, but it varies from circumstances.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Fair enough. Thank you.
Marga,
Please. So, Marga,
Yeah, good morning.
floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi. How are
Hello.
you? Thank you for your interesting presentation. I was just wondering that maybe have you thought or explored the possibility of linking your methodology with crop forecasting, because I think you have a lot of data that maybe could be modified in season or adapted in season. If you could have more information about precipitation in advance, especially for rainfall, of course.
So I'll explain that, Margarita. We are looking into it, and that is something in our mind. And I have submitted a project to the government for funding. So we want to use the weather data to predict what is the requirement, especially the evapotranspiration and crop water requirement. So we have 60 weather stations installed across the province, and that live data can come in my computer. So it is automated. So, and that is a huge data set. What we propose to the government that we will utilize that data for the entire island, considering all the cropping system, and we'll make some recommendation about the evapotranspiration and crop water requirement, obviously at different stages of the crop. And so we are looking into that, and you have a very good suggestion that maybe we can look into the crop yield predictions over the years too. That the same data we can utilize and kind of predict what it will look like 10 years from today or 5 years from today. It's more like similar to the climate modeling that the sea level is going to be 2 meter high in 30 years, and that's all. So similar strategy can be applied, but currently we only have started the crop water requirement, but that's a very good suggestion.
Well, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.
Can we check the chat? Because there is a question in the chat. All right. How did you find those qualitative categories? Could you please?
Yeah, so those categories, so those are basically, again, you like in interpolation, you need to cut on where you think is optimal. For example, if you're getting values 1 to 10, and I want to say that maybe 1 to 4 is my least category, then 4 to 7, and then anything above 7 is the highest category. And obviously, you need to go back, take the soil samples in those zones, and kind of measure the organic matter, nutrient concentration to validate actually what you're thinking. Sometimes it could be something else playing the role, and you're getting a different value. And we have seen if you're into a very moist field, like it rained, and the next day you're in field, it's wet, then you get different trends. So there are quite a few fluctuations which you can have. So it basically, but right now we have a pretty good handle on the SWOT mapping. We know that those categories work. We know that they are influential. And we have seen that a significant acreage over the last 2-3 years on PEI that has been SWOT mapped and managed variable rate. We have presented the results to the grower association. They are extremely pleased. They are happy. They can see the difference. And if grower, they are born scientists, in my opinion. They have a lot of experience, historical data, historical trends, and if they are saying it's working, obviously there is something. But just to answer this question, that there is requirement of some physical validation. If you are in a new field, maybe take few samples in those zones to see if your zoning is actually right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. I'm going to propose Dr. Farooque to write his email here. Okay.
Yeah.
And so if anyone wants to get in contact with him, you can send him an email. As I said, he's going to be here with us today and tomorrow.
Yeah.
So feel free to contact him. If you get lost, write me and I can send you his email. And so now I just propose a clap for Dr. Farooque, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.